Welcome to today's edition of Daytime Dialogues. It is my great pleasure to introduce someone who I haven't met before today, Yael Valier. Yael is the creative director of a Jerusalem-based program called Theater and Theology that puts on plays. She's the director. Some of the plays, the name may sound familiar, such as she put on the play of The Blessing of a Broken Heart about Kobe Mandel's murder, but also she created this play of the Disputation of Barcelona, and one that we'll probably talk about a little bit, called Off the Derech de la Rosa. And what makes it so fascinating is that it's not just going to a play, but you learn about the theology behind it. And as a result, after every one of the productions, there's a scholar who shares thoughts, and the list of scholars is really from A to Z. Just to mention a few that many of us know, Dr. Erica Brown has been part of it. Aaron Leibowitz has been part of it. Seth Mandel, Jeffrey Sachs, Shani Tarragon, and also non-Jewish scholars as well, Father David Mark Newhouse, etc. And so it's a great pleasure for me to be able to welcome Yael to our program and to really thank her for giving us this time right now. So thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure and my privilege. Thank you.
Well, so yeah, let's start from the beginning. How did you come up with this idea of combining theater and theology?
I love theater and I love theology. And so it wasn't such a great leap for me. I'd been in there's a very strong English speaking theater community in Jerusalem, many companies, high quality stuff, and also in Gush Etzion, where I live. And I've been involved since I made Aliyah, more or less, in '97. I started directing a number of years ago, and I was directing for other companies. And I got tired of directing what other companies wanted me to direct, and I wanted to really delve into the things that I think about. I've been a member of the David Cardozo Academy think tank for the last 12 years or so. That's run by Rabbi Natan Lopez Cardozo, which many of you will have heard of. And so I have theology on my mind. And so I wanted to combine them. I also wanted to find a derech, a suitable way for Orthodox Jews to do theater. I've been involved in all women's theater, and that's wonderful. And there's a place for that. But I believe ideologically that men and women can be in audiences together and can be appropriately on stage together in shows that are deep and meaningful, even though they might be funny too. And then to have a discussion together. I'm trying to bring more conservative audiences into the theater. And
are there a lot of people involved in theater in Israel who are Dati, who are Orthodox?
Yes. Jerusalem is this wonderful, exciting place where Orthodox and not Orthodox Jews work together in theater. And you have this really interesting phenomenon where all the English-speaking theater directors I know in Jerusalem, there are about 10 companies or 11 companies. They work around Nagia issues, for example. If they have actors who don't want to touch a member of the opposite sex, they'll direct around. And it's not just my company or other nominally from companies, Orthodox companies, that will do that. All the directors will do that. There was a production of Pippin, for any of your viewers who have heard of Pippin, a musical where the lead was Shomer Nagia, and they directed around. They direct around all sorts of issues, and that makes it a very welcoming place to be an Orthodox Jewish actor.
So let's talk about the different productions you've done. Of the plays that you have directed for theater and theology, which one do you think was the most exciting or unique or special that we can use as an example?
Wow. I love all the plays I direct, and that's why I direct them. And I founded the company so that I could choose things I really love. So that's a tough question for me. I'll start with Divine Right, because it's the one I chose to begin with. It's the one about the disputation. I did not write it. It was written by Roy Dolliner. Roy Dolliner is a very interesting man. He was the co-author of the Sistine Secrets. Some of your listeners may have heard of that. He was the first Orthodox Jew to be qualified as a Vatican guide, and his expertise is in art and Christianity. So he wrote a play about the disputation of Nachmanides of the Ramban in 1263. There's another famous play about it. I actually think that Roy Dolliner's is much better for Orthodox Jews, or for even not Orthodox Jews, for the Jewish audience of Jerusalem, whether they're Orthodox or not. The Jewish audiences tend to be very knowledgeable Jewishly. And so this play was wonderful because you could really sink your teeth, even though it was so exciting. The back and forth between the Catholic Church and the Ramban was so exciting, as reported by the Ramban, and we still actually have a record of what the Ramban's summary of the events. So very exciting stuff, and something that the audiences could really sink their minds into, their teeth into.
So the audience that comes, will you have
Mhm.
Dati and Chiloni
Yes.
people in the audience?
Yes, and I'm really striving for that in theater and theology, and I'm grateful to be able to report that I'm succeeding. And I will get Haredi is hard to get into to walk into a theater. Women will, men less, but here and there, certainly for this play, I did have a Haredi audience. And yeah, absolutely, secular people will come in. And one of the things I do is I have a range of people speak afterward. You mentioned some, not all that I have, from secular, atheist, humanist, Jewish scholars, all the way to as Haredi as I can pull into the theater, because I want people to be thinking and hearing other points of view. And I debate whoever I'm talking to. I'll push back in the opposite direction. It's what I love to do.
So people know when they come to the theater that they're going to be watching the play and staying afterwards for the discussion you have?
Right. So I would say about 10% of the people leave before the discussion. They don't want a discussion, and I'm satisfied because I know that we're putting on a good play. My plays are not just springboards for discussion. You really get you get 2 for 1. You get a lecture or a discussion, but you also get a play. But yes, and people sometimes choose the evening if they can, based on the scholar who's coming. If they say, "Hey, I've never heard a Reform rabbi speak before," they'll come on that evening. Or I've never heard a Haredi position or a conservative religious position. I want to hear this. They'll come on that evening.
So in that one play, every time the play ran, every time there was a scholar afterwards?
Right. Yes.
So that's almost as hard as putting together a play, lining up the
Yes, it's
speakers.
really hard. But I've discovered that the scholars also get something from it, because I speak to academics, and their other academics read their things, their works, their papers, their books, and they're not reaching a wide audience. Sometimes they might want to. Some of the people I speak to obviously are more community people, but for the academics, I'm really providing a new audience, and actually for some of the community leaders also, because I'm going to have a mix in the audience. So
Do you remember? I'm sorry.
ahead.
So do you remember
No,
who
please.
the most animated, the most I don't know if controversial is the right word.
Yeah.
The one again, who were the speakers who really attracted people?
Rabbi Chuck Davidson. He's a vociferously anti-rabbanut rabbi.
Yes, I have received some of his joyful emails to me. Yes.
Okay. So he was fun to interview because he doesn't hold back. And so even and I mean, even when I agree with him, he puts things in he's very harif, he's spicy. And so that was fun. Sometimes when I get people also are interested in the play, The Divine Right, about the disputation. I invited 2 priests to talk about what do Catholic Jewish relations look like now, right? In 1263, they weren't so good, although the play actually pointed out some things that we don't usually dwell on, which is that there was some cooperation between Christians and Jews, scholars. That comes out in the play also, and we discussed that also. So of course, people were very interested to come and listen to a priest's take on this story. So that was exciting for people, but it's always exciting.
Yeah. And which theater do you use? What venue are the plays at?
Right. So mostly the Khan Theater in the center of town. The Khan Theater was built on the ruins of a Crusader inn, and it's raw stone inside. And it feels, the theater itself feels like a cave. It's very atmospheric, and I love it because it feels so Jerusalem. It's so
So
Jerusalem.
that's the one right across from the railroads, from the train station?
Yes, exactly. We have performed in other venues. We've also performed outside of Jerusalem, so we perform in other venues. We've performed at Beit Mazia also, which is a beautiful little theater right off Betzalel Street in the center of town for anyone who has come to visit. But the Khan Theater is really our home.
So how did you get to this? In other words, you have your bachelor's from Stern College, you have your master's from Bryn Mawr. You grew up in a number of different places, which I discovered. How did you end up into the theater? What was your path?
I wish I could tell you something exciting, but and I wish I could tell you I was a child actor and successful and all that. It's not true. I went to an acting class when I was a teenager. When I came to Israel, I started acting in a local Gush Etzion theater company called Raise Your Spirits, an all women's company, very successful. And they do biblical musicals, and I enjoyed that for a number of years, and it was wonderful for me. And I started assistant directing, and then I got into directing in other companies in order to branch out. Also, because, again, though I see the need for all women's groups, that's not where I lie ideologically. So I branched out and started. What I did was I assistant directed and then plunged in and started directing, and then realized that I didn't know what I was doing, and so I bought a whole bunch of books because I'm old-fashioned. Younger people do it via YouTube. I still do it via book. So bought a whole bunch of books, directing textbooks, did all the exercises, started practicing on people, and then developed that way.
And in terms of the future of theater and theology, of where you're headed, are you in a place where you just are going to find additional plays that you want to produce and direct, or are you thinking of other venues, of other methods, of other ways to branch out?
Okay, it's a great question, because with Blessing of a Broken Heart, which we did this year, we had some interest actually from American audience members who wanted to bring it to the States off Broadway, because they felt that this story has universal appeal, and it does. It's about grief, and it's about resilience. It's brilliantly written, almost entirely based on Sherry's book, and whatever Sherry Mandel's book, and whatever wasn't directly from the book, it was her input that added it in. So it's really something universal, and it's also something particular about the Jews that can be marketed to the world in a way that maybe the world can actually hear, because it's getting harder and harder, of course, for Jews and Zionists to be heard in the world. So there was some interest in the States, but it costs at least $300,000 to bring something off Broadway. And so people started fundraising, and who knows, if they succeed, we'll come off Broadway.
And you've mentioned so far two plays, one very serious about the disputation, and one sad and serious about the tragedy. Have there been fun plays? Yes,
absolutely. There's a contemporary playwright in the States called Tom Dudzik. He writes wonderful comedies. I haven't asked him, but it's pretty clear that he's a lapsed Catholic. And I put on one of his comedies. In the States, it's called Hail Mary. I thought that might not go down so well with my audiences. Certainly part of the audience, yes. I renamed it Off the Derech Dolorosa with Tom Dudzick's permission after I explained what Off the Derech means. And it's a comedy about a young woman who wants to be a nun, but she wants to reform the education system that these Catholic children are enduring, are suffering, and she wants to make it all about love. And she sort of neglects the teaching them about the sacraments, and it translates very well to Jewish issues of education and how much of the halacha do we have to specify, and how much do we hem them in, and how much do we use a rule stick. And how much is it have to be about ahava, and what's the best way to prepare children to become religious adults? So we laughed, and it was fun, and there were nuns, and there was a Rabbi Artie Fisher, who teaches in Chappelle's, was playing a priest, and that's so fun, right? And all this stuff. But then later we can take a step back after laughing at the antics on stage and say, how does this apply to us? What is it? What can we learn about chinuch and this balance that we try to find?
But didn't that create a problem regarding audiences? You talked about before having Haredim coming and having
Right.
Chilonim coming.
Right.
I can't imagine too many people from center right coming to something named Off the Derech Dolorosa, unless if they don't know what Dolorosa refers to.
So that's a good question. Actually, I think you'd be surprised. People are more open than you might expect. I did have, with one of my plays, where I had Christian icons on stage, right? Either a Virgin Mary statue or a crucifix. This was for the Divine Right, for the one about the Ramban. I had in some of neighborhoods, I took this one around Israel. In neighborhoods where I thought people would be disturbed, I wrote a paragraph on the poster. If these Christian icons on the stage disturb you, then that is a little bit of a reflection of what the Jews in the time of the Ramban in Barcelona or in wherever were, that they were surrounded by these, and this is a little bit of what they were feeling and what they had to cope with. So let that become part of the experience. And I think that helped. In fact, one of the places where insisted that unless I had that paragraph there, they weren't going to let me bring my set in.
And what's been the most surprising outcome of the plays that you've put on so far?
I've met a lot of interesting people. I didn't expect that. I've become friends with a priest who came to see the Off the Derech Dolorosa and became a fan and wanted to talk to me about the issues, because of course we religious people, we share issues of like chinuch, right? How do we educate our children? And he'd been teaching and living in Jerusalem for a number of years, but didn't know really any Jews, because he lives in St. Anne's Church and teaches there. He's a theologian. He teaches seminarians. And since then, we've been friends. He's come a number of times for Shabbat, knows the whole family. That was surprising. I didn't expect that. And I've also gotten a small Mormon following, which is also really interesting, because there's a Brigham Young University in Jerusalem.
Right on top of Har HaZeitim.
That's right. And they also really identified with the issues, because it turns out that though I'm not aiming these plays at non-Jews necessarily, we share issues. So that's surprising.
Have you had pushback? Have you had pushback against the plays?
I mean, some people just won't come. I have had some posters taken down. But we're making theater and theology sound much more controversial than it is. I haven't been embroiled in controversy at all.
It's fascinating. In other words, I know of in Israel the program Ma'alot, which produced movies. Males, I'm sorry, which produced movies and TV shows. I know some of the people involved. I didn't realize how extensive the participation of the team was in theater. Is it something that people are looking at since you started? So 5 years ago, since you started, have you seen any shifts? Well, maybe you had to take a couple of years off because of COVID, but
Yeah, unfortunately, we did some stuff
yeah.
on the web,
I-
some shifts. What do you mean? What kind of shift would
Well,
you?
do you see more are you seeing that more that team are getting involved? Are you seeing that there are more productions that are available, more sensitivity to issues, even more
Well,
education?
I founded Theater and Theology because there are very few companies doing straight plays, and that's really what I'm interested in. Since then, another company has sprung up, Rhinoceros Productions, also to do straight plays, and maybe that's because they've seen that people will come. Thank God, I am filling theaters.
Mhm.
So maybe we're going to have a shift that way, and that's exciting. There have been Orthodox Jews involved in theater, though, since I've been involved in Israel. It may be something that you haven't encountered, but I strongly encourage you next time you come to visit to come to the theater. Let me know ahead of time. I'll tell you what's on.
No, I
Uh,
appreciate it. I'm just trying to imagine in the United States. Um, I don't, I'm unaware of the people who are involved in theater. And it sounds like part of the Zionist
well,
dream. That team can be involved in everything.
that's absolutely right. The one example I can give you of someone who was involved in the States before he made Aliyah was Rabbi Dr. Johnny Krug, who is an academic and an educator, but spent decades, more than 30, on and off Broadway as a lighting designer. And he made Aliyah. I got lucky. He's now my production designer. He's been involved in theater forever, but he's really he's a special case, a Renaissance man, and he can do it all.
Yes, he can. He can write. He worked in schools. He did all of those things. And
Right.
in addition, one of his son married a Chicago girl, so from KINS, Canada. So it all works out for him.
Wonderful.
And if someone wanted to be involved in theater, let's say someone's watching and is in the United States and wanted to be involved in theater, would you believe that there's space for that person in the United States, or is it something unique to Israel?
I only lived in the States for 7 years. I'm actually not American, and I don't really, I don't know the answer to that because I lived there. I was there in college and graduate school, and then we made Aliyah. And I was very involved in college and graduate school. So I don't know the answer. I really don't know American culture very well. I just
But
speak in this accent because I default to it. But
listen, I understand. What's your natural accent?
I, I, I don't know if I have a natural accent. My parents are both French. And so French was my first language, but I was born in Japan and I went to an international school. So who knows what accents I was hearing in English then. And, in the Jewish community was Russians who had escaped from Russia to Japan. Those were the other Jews. And then we moved to South Africa, so my accent changed. And then we moved to England. So I don't really, I can speak in all those accents and I'm equally comfortable, but I don't know if I'm actually a voice actor. You can hear me on Baby TV. That's a Fox Networks
Really?
baby channel. I do children's dubbing and I do British and American dubbing. So
Is there a famous show that you have done that people might
well,
know?
yeah, well, if you had a 3-year-old, they might know Charlie and the Alphabet, Charlie and the Numbers, Mona and Sketch. I do all the voices, almost all the voices in Mona and Sketch.
Really?
But if you don't have a 3-year-old at home or you don't have a TV, which actually I don't, then you
And
won't.
those are things you can do from Israel?
Absolutely. There's a lot of voice acting going on in Israel and a lot of animation. In fact, some Fox TV shows are fully produced in Israel. They're written, the writer is Israeli, then they're translated The animation is done by Israeli companies. The dubbing is done in Israel. I regularly dub, and then it goes out as a worldwide product.
I'm sorry to be so far afield, but can you give us some examples so we can be proud of these shows coming from Israel?
Well, sure. If you go to, I mean, I only know, like I said, I actually don't have a TV, and I'm actually not clued into the TV world, but the Fox Baby Network, it's called Baby TV, and it's their baby channel. It's like Nickelodeon, but for younger people. A lot of their shows are made in Israel. I mean, I can go Post Train and all the Charlie shows and Mona and Sketch and many others.
Amazing.
Mike Spikes in production now, coming to a TV near you.
And what do you have, going back to the theater and theology?
Mhm.
What's the next play on the horizon?
Okay, so it's another comedy by Tom Dudzik called Miracle on South Division Street. And it's about
Is that the original title?
Yes, that's the
Okay.
original title. It's about a Catholic family who believes that the Virgin Mary appeared to their patriarch in his barbershop in Buffalo, New York. And as the play progresses, they begin to, the miracle unravels. They start to question the historicity of this miracle and suspect that maybe it didn't happen. And then they're left with the aftermath is, what do? We thought we were chosen. We thought we were special. We had a miracle, and now it didn't happen quite like we thought it had. What do we do now with our religiosity? There are 4 people in the play. They all deal with in different directions. And again, we'll laugh. It's lovely, sweet comedy. But then we'll take a step back and we'll say, okay, that was fun. What do we do when we start looking at the stories we learn? Oh, I see that you need to
No,
wrap
we're
it up.
doing fine. No,
Okay.
we're doing fine.
Okay, so I'll discuss with scholars, what do we do when we grow up and we start to question the things that we learned in kindergarten? This simple faith that we had in many things, and the modern world throws rationality at us, and we start to wonder about the historicity of miracles, and how do we react? Do we say, well, no, it happened exactly like it says, or do we say, well, what is a miracle, and how can I, how can I still see divinity in the world even if I don't know exactly what happened on Har Sinai? Or do we throw it all away? What do we do, and how do we cope as mature adults with these religious questions that plague us? So it'll turn serious.
But it's fascinating that the 2 of the plays really have a Christian theme to it, which you're able to move over to a Jewish theme.
Very easily. There are a few Christian things that, there are a few Christian issues and underlying assumptions, axioms that don't translate at all. But I don't have to talk about those, right? I talk about what really does resonate for us. Mm-hmm. And that's actually one of the issues I have as a director with my actors, is when they're acting like Christians, we have to learn how would a Christian react to that sentence, right? As a Jew, I might not. This is, for example, the Ramban one. As a Jew, I might nod at something the Ramban said, but if I'm playing a monk, I'm supposed to be horrified. It's hard to be horrified if you don't find something horrifying, if you don't even understand why it's horrifying. So we work on that, and that's fun because we do a lot of thinking as we rehearse these issues.
I didn't ask this, but I'm assuming all of the plays are in English, or do you have plays?
Yes, the plays are in English.
Israeli audiences have to know English, so it's probably
yes.
More
yes,
English.
I could do subtitles. Some of the English-speaking companies use subtitles. I don't.
So is it also safe to say that most of the people who are coming are Anglo in some fashion, whether yes. children of Anglos or Olim?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jerusalem is the place for that.
Right. And but would you see a theater like this also working for pure Israelis? For pure Israelis is the wrong term to use. Sabarim who are generations.
Right. It's a very good question. And the answer is not necessarily, because the culture of theater is very different in the Israeli world. First of all, theater is either highly professional and highly produced. It's not simple necessarily, or it's high school. And there's very little space for the kind of theater we do, this sort of community theater, but high quality community theater where people can come and see something really good that isn't high school.
And on that, our time is actually up.
Okay.
And I truly appreciate your time and this conversation. I've learned a tremendous amount, and I will try to see if there's a time where I can watch
Absolutely.
one of the plays. I know where it's at. And I thank you for your
Good.
work, and I wish you all of the best, especially now in this new year. Gemar Chatima Tova to you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all of the things you're doing to help bring people closer, not only to the arts, but to theology itself.
Please God. Please God.
Shana
Thank you.
Tova.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Shana Tova. Bye-bye.